no one ever expected a mainstream crossover. I don't think you can find one person in the world who would ever expect that a mod for Arma 2 would make a mainstream crossover. Even a really popular mod like the... it was in Battlefield, the Project Reality. So Battlefield, the Project Reality team switched to using Arma. I think even people never expected that would be able to achieve a mainstream crossover, let alone some random zombie mod from New Zealand.
You might not believe it, but it's true. DayZ was actually born in the jungle of Borneo. It was December 2010, and Dean Hall, or Rocket as he's known, the game's creator, hadn't eaten for 7 days. He was lying on a cold, wet, horrible bed of sticks and leaves. His fingernails had turned yellow from malnutrition, and his hair had begun to fall out. Used to the easy comforts of the New Zealand army, he quickly finished his rations and turned to eating raw fish, ferns, and whatever else he could find. By the time he was airlifted back to Singapore, he was 25 kilograms lighter. Suffering from dysentery, and had to undergo emergency surgery to remove an obstacle in his intestines. It nearly ended his life.
When I was doing survival training was, I guess, where a core part of it came from. I was on exchange with the Singaporean Armed Forces, and we went to Brunei to do a survival course, and it was really hard. I ended up getting badly injured. I had to have like surgery and stuff.
What happened?
I got really malnutritioned because I run out of food. You have to do this survival assessment, and I basically didn't eat for about 7 days.
Trouble.
And yeah, so that didn't sort of end too well.
The near-death experience was the turning point of his life, and during his 7-week recovery, he realized he'd been holding himself back. Hall immediately threw himself into recreating his experience for the benefit of other soldiers and tried to pitch it to the New Zealand military. However, he soon got frustrated with the resistance of the top brass in what is a very slow-moving organisation, and realised he wasn't going to get anywhere unless he took a different direction entirely. And this time, he decided, he was going to live for the moment and do what he liked, regardless of the consequences.
Well, it was a real, I guess, watershed moment. That was when I was like, okay, these are the things I'm really interested in. So I'd re-enlisted in the army because when I was working in the video game industry, I hated what I was doing. So I quit and then just suddenly re-enlisted in the military. And so after 2 years and after the time overseas, I decided, after that I kind of said, okay, these are the things I want to do. I don't really care if I make a lot of money. I just want to make the kind of games that I like, even if, that's going to screw up my career.
After returning from the jungle, Rocket had become bored and wanted to get away from New Zealand to help him get his head together firstly, and also have the time to work on his new gaming ideas. He was already a long-time modder and had often contacted Bohemia's creative director, Ivan Bochka, with questions about coding. This time, however, he wrote to ask whether Bohemia was hiring. The company was interested in Hall's military history and was impressed with the mods he'd made in the past, so set him up as a contractor. They needed help on Arma 3 and agreed to bring him on.
Well, I've been modding probably since the Amiga, since I had an Amiga, so probably since the late 80s, yeah.
And what games did you mod?
Well, the first game I ever made was called Submarine. I'm not really good with names. DayZ, Submarine. Maybe I should be like an operational planner for the Pentagon and like come up with all very obvious operation names. But yeah, actually probably my coolest mod I've ever made is still unreleased, and it's the one that got me my job at Bohemia. I basically ripped out the entire engine for Arma and I made a space simulator. So you can actually go up in a shuttle and float around as an astronaut, and I spent like 2 years recreating a shuttle model and making an astronaut, and I come up with my own physics for it all. But yeah, I haven't actually released it.
After nothing more than a message on Skype saying he could work as a contractor, he hopped on a plane and set off to be a game designer on his own terms. It wasn't a great deal. He had to take a leave of absence from the New Zealand army, buy his own ticket to the Czech Republic, and would be paid less than he'd be making as a lowly second lieutenant. but it was like a hardcore Star Wars fan being invited to go work at LucasArts. He took the job. Still, when he arrived at Bohemia, he decided not to tell anyone else about what he was working on. They're all hardcore realism military junkies, and he says he felt kind of embarrassed that he was making a zombie mod. He thought they'd reckon zombies were just stupid, so decided to put DayZ online instead. He figured a few hundred people would play, and no one else would notice.
I guess the fantastic thing for me is that I was there when, like, right at the first time when it was literally just an idea. Just one guy's idea. I was, that was me. I was right there, and then it became this big thing that's way larger than me. There's people making mods of the mod, and developing all these applications. There's this lore about it. There's memes, and that came from, I can remember when I was just this some guy sitting at a computer, and I made those first keystrokes. So that's, I think, the most rewarding part of it. And I don't think nobody can ever take that away. It's not like money or anything like that, or fame or fortune. That is something that fundamentally creating something that then takes on a life of its own. DayZ is a product of maybe 100 failed mods of mine, and failed little experiments, and a whole bunch of little failures along the way. And it's continuing to make little failures. And I think DayZ is able to survive because I am able to be so honest about where it's at that we don't have all this PR fallout from when we make these little failures.
What he created was a reproduction of his experience in the jungle, something filled with frustration, fear, and decisions that could quickly lead to death. It had absolutely no advertising, no user manual, no plot, and was designed to kill the player over and over with absolutely no remorse. He wanted it to be brutal.
Oh God, the car, Jesus. Oh Jesus. Well, quick, get to the car, they're eating them.
And yet DayZ has become a phenomenon, like the Facebook of gaming. Critics have described it as possibly the best zombie game ever made. One magazine called it one of the most important things ever to have happened to PC gaming. Others gave DayZ its Game of the Year award, as well as ranking it as the 5th best PC game of all time.
And we didn't even really announce it. Originally, it was just the game name in the game browser. We put the download link for the mod, and people started playing it. And then it sort of started exploding, and it was all outside of the Arma community. It was actually on forums like NeoGAF and 4chan. And then it was just like in a few days, all of a sudden, we had like thousands of people playing it.
By the end of its first month, DayZ had attracted 10,000 users, and Rocket decided he'd better mention it to Bohemia. Sure enough, they were dismissive. The company was finishing its latest Arma release and didn't have any time for zombies. At that point, Arma 2 had been out for 3 years and was nearing the end of its life cycle. Arma 3 was supposed to jumpstart the company's sales. But suddenly purchases of Arma 2 started ticking up. By June, just 2 months after release, around 20,000 players were using Arma 2 to play DayZ. By early July, there were 400,000 users. And it didn't stop there. In August, more than 1 million people were playing DayZ. Arma 2 was suddenly a top-selling PC game again. In the 3 years before Hall put DayZ online, Arma 2 had sold 1 million copies. Now it sold another million in just a few months.
It started to take off, and there were some early indications that it was going to be crazy. But I still remember the moment that I thought 600 concurrent users. I was like, we're going to peak at 600 concurrent users. I was mentally preparing myself. I was like, come on, we're going to peak. I think we peaked at 92,000 concurrent users, which is like bigger than a lot of AAA titles. I can't remember how many EVE Online does concurrents, but yeah, that's a very high concurrent user number.
And that was after you opened up the servers to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, we don't know how many concurrent users we have nowadays.
Just imagine. Rocket had only been in the Czech Republic for 5 months as a junior designer. He was still living out of a suitcase, but he'd already become an integral part of Bohemia's revenue, and potentially, as its bosses were realizing, its future. The company had made millions from the new Arma 2 sales, so when Rocket said he wanted to turn DayZ into a standalone game, the CEO offered him a promotion from junior designer to the top job, project lead, and a signing bonus big enough to buy himself whatever he wanted.
It's funny because just at the time when I decided that money didn't matter in my life, like I'd finally paid off the last of my debt, when I re-enlisted in the army, I decided I was just going to make decisions based on things that were fun. Literally, exactly at that point in time when I decided that I didn't care about anything else, I was just going to chill. Like, I financially was doing a very stupid thing when I moved to the Czech Republic because their salaries there are much lower and things like that. So it's really hilarious how it works out. Just at that time was when suddenly I get access, the ability to do these things that I'd written off.
After asking himself what he really cared about, what he really wanted to do, he came up with something completely unexpected. Just as he was about to sign his contract with Bohemia, he walked straight into the CEO's office and told him he'd decided to pay $100,000 to go and climb Mount Everest. In the middle of the biggest success of his life, he was going to disappear from civilization completely for 2 months and head to the roof of the world. He stayed in touch with his team at Bohemia and continued working on DayZ right up until his final push to the summit, even handling things like design decisions and budget approvals, even though he nearly lost 2 toes and had already found a stranded climber who later died. And then, one day in late May 2013, when the weather was just right, it was time to make the final push. And since then, well, he actually flew directly from Nepal back over to California and went back to work at the E3 exhibition. And then in December of last year, DayZ Standalone was released. It stayed at the top of Steam's bestseller list ever since release, selling 1 million copies in a month. That's 33,000 a day. And it still continues to top the charts even as I'm making this video. It's raised tens of millions of dollars, and yet he manages to stay so completely down to earth.
Hello, Rocket. Hello. Are you friendly? Friendly? Sure? Yes. You can come here. Hold up.